As many of you know, there is always a war brewing in the Minecraft community on which version of the game is better. Some say the original version released on PC, known as Java Edition, is the best, whereas some others say that Bedrock Edition released almost everywhere else is better. And then there are the people who say 3DS is best. Now for me personally, I usually play the Java Edition, since it's the version I've played the longest, but I have definitely dabbled a little bit in Bedrock Edition over the years. Part of the reason this debate is so volatile is because each version of the game has some exclusive features that aren't found in the other editions. Nearly 2 years ago now, I made a video discussing some of these exclusive features in the Bedrock Edition. That was so long ago, I'm sure some of you weren't even born yet. I enjoyed making that video quite a bit, and it seems like you all liked it too, as it quickly became one of my most popular videos. So I thought, hey, why not do a sequel and finally talk about even more Bedrock exclusive features. Now I'll be honest, I was putting off doing a sequel in fear that I already covered all of the interesting facts in the first video. I wasn't gonna make a sequel if it was just gonna be stuff like, there is now splash text saying, made by Mojang. Wow, how exciting. But when I went off to do my research on the wiki, I discovered that I wasn't even close to covering all of the interesting features exclusive to Bedrock. A lot of these features today totally surprised me when I found out about them, so I think if you're also a Java player, you'll almost certainly find something new here. Heck, since most Minecraft content on YouTube is about Java Edition, I'm sure some Bedrock players are also going to learn a thing or two here as well. Since I covered almost all of the features I knew about in the first video, these ones are going to be a lot more obscure, which I hope will make this video possibly even more interesting than the first. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. So to start us off here, I want to look at one of the more useful exclusive features in this video. As most of you probably know, in both Java and Bedrock Edition, you're able to bone meal double tall flowers. This will cause a copy of that flower to pop off of it, which can be used to plant somewhere else or craft into dye. By itself, this is already a pretty great feature, but what if you really need blue dye? Well, Bedrock Edition actually has a bit of an expanded version of this feature. While playing in Java, you aren't able to bone meal single tall flowers at all, which is a shame since that's the majority of the flower types in this game. However, if you try to do the same in Bedrock Edition, the bone meal will actually work. If there are open grass blocks nearby the flower, a copy of it will pop up. That makes farming single tall flowers much easier than in Java Edition. You can farm flowers on Java by bone mealing the grass, but not only does that rely on randomness, it also relies on the biome you do it in, as certain flowers will only appear in certain biomes. With Bedrock Edition's version though, you can not only guarantee the flower you get from the bone meal, but you can do it in literally any biome. So you can set up flower farms for all of the flower types right in your base if you wanted to. Not only are the flowers great to have for decoration, but this also opens the door for easier farming of several different dye types. Unfortunately though, it doesn't work with every flower. Both the torch flower and wither rose don't do anything when bone meal. I guess that is understandable since they do work differently from the other flowers. Overall though, I think this is a very helpful feature that I would love to see ported over to Java someday. Speaking of bones, I wanted to talk a bit about the Stray. Conceptually, I think it's one of Minecraft's cooler mobs, being a snow-based variant of the skeleton. Now from what I can tell, they behave pretty similarly between the two editions. However, there is something really interesting to note about some of the biomes the strays can spawn in. They spawn in pretty much every cold biome in the game. However, in Bedrock Edition, the snowy tundra and snowy mountain biomes can only spawn strays. That's right, no other monsters will spawn in these biomes besides strays themselves. So if you go there at night, you won't encounter any of the other nighttime monsters like creepers. Slimes can still spawn in slime chunks and spawners still work, but if you run around on the surface of these biomes, you'll just find strays. I thought this was a really cool feature when I found out about it, since it doesn't feel like the hostile mob spawning changes this drastically in almost any Java overworld biome. This would probably be very helpful for making stray farms since you wouldn't have to worry about other mobs filling up the mob cap. Not sure if this is a feature I need in Java, but it was certainly interesting to learn about. While we're talking about mobs, I got a few more that I thought were pretty interesting. One of the most helpful methods of transporting mobs is by using boats, since almost any creature, hostile or not, can go inside of them. With that said though, in Java Edition, it can sometimes be annoying to get a mob in the boat. That's where this minor change on Bedrock Edition comes in. On this version, you can actually ride the boat directly into the mob, and they'll enter right into the back seat if it's open. On the other hand, if you tried this on Java, the mob would just completely ignore you. This isn't a huge difference, but can be pretty practical given the right circumstance. Though just be careful of accidentally kidnapping drowns while boating. Okay, I only wrote this in as a bit, but it actually turns out that drowns have a unique animation in Bedrock Edition when they get in a boat, so it sort of looks like they're clinging to the back. That's really cool. Also, one other interesting thing I noticed while messing around with the boats is that trapping an enderman in Bedrock with the boat method can actually let them get hit by arrows. In Java Edition, it's completely impossible to ever hit an enderman by shooting it, even if it's in a boat, because it'll quickly teleport. Not sure why he doesn't just teleport out of the boat, but whatever. Another exclusive mob feature has to do with the tropical fish. On both editions, this mob has the pretty unique property of coming in a ton of different color combos. And I'm not just talking about the 16 colors of sheep, I'm talking more like 3,072 different combos. That's a lot of fish. But on Java, whenever you pick up any of these in a bucket, it will always just appear as a clownfish with the name Bucket of Tropical Fish. On Bedrock Edition though, while the texture always remains the same, the name of the bucket will actually change based on the fish inside. So the naming scheme will now go bucket of color 1 - color 2 fish model. Now Java Edition does list the type of fish in the bucket as well, it's just part of the item description rather than the name. Additionally, there are 22 specific combinations of models and colors that are directly based on real life fish, so they'll instead be called by their actual real life fish name. While this list of 22 fish is very similar between both versions, Java Edition gets the blue tang and tomato clownfish, whereas Bedrock gets the blue dory and tomato clown. Anyway, I think this naming thing is really cool. Not necessary to come to Java since we have the description, but seeing the long item name is funny to me. The battle for the longest item name in Minecraft rages on. While we're sticking with the water, let's take a look at one of the game's structures, the shipwreck. As most of you probably know, the shipwrecks can appear in all sorts of different wood types. You can find boats with oak, birch, spruce, jungle, and dark oak wood throughout your world's oceans. Or crashed into the side of mountains. How do they even do that? On Bedrock Edition though, you could also find shipwrecks with acacia wood as part of the design, which isn't seen at all on Java Edition. Acacia wood kinda sucks, so it's not like I'm gonna cry about this change, but it's nice to have some more variety. Hope we can also get cherry and pale oak boats in the future. That'd be very mango coated. Sticking with some small world gen stuff for a second, swamp biomes on Bedrock are also a little different than their Java counterparts. On Bedrock Edition, you can actually find naturally spawning giant mushrooms here. Obviously, you could always find and grow mushrooms in Java if you want to, but the extra added detail of the giant mushrooms in the swamp do add a nice bit of detail and color to the biome. And as for one last generation detail, I wanted to talk a bit about nether portals. Whenever you go through one and it happens to spawn on the other side floating, it'll generate with a bit of extra obsidian around it to act as a floor. That's just to make sure that when you go through, you won't accidentally. However, this works slightly differently on Bedrock Edition. On top of the extra obsidian, netherrack will also spawn as part of this platform too. Now that wouldn't normally be that notable, however, this actually means that on Bedrock Edition, netherrack is a renewable resource. Which I mean, thank God, I can never get enough of it. Yeah, this is obviously not the most exciting thing for a normal world, but this could be pretty good in Skyblock since netherrack is completely impossible to obtain there. I don't have any strong feelings about this feature, but I wouldn't mind it getting added to Java at some point. And you know what, while we're here, one of the most interesting fun facts about the nether is that in both versions, if you place a wet sponge in the dimension, it'll instantly dry out. This can be quite helpful when draining large areas, so you don't need to waste time and fuel with furnaces. However, in Bedrock Edition, the nether is not the only place that'll dry sponges out. If you place a wet sponge in a dry overworld biome, so something like the desert, after a few minutes, the sponge will also dry itself out. Now obviously that's not as useful compared to the instant drying in the nether, but there is a bit more to this. See, in these dry biomes, if you use a sponge to pick up water, it'll instantly dry itself after doing so, with a unique bit of steam coming off the sponge. Now this sadly doesn't seem to work infinitely, as if water keeps hitting it over and over again, it will eventually remain as a wet sponge and have to wait a few minutes. However, if you only need to clear out a small bit of water in these dry biomes, this could definitely speed up the process quite a bit. Speaking of water, I want to take a quick look at the Conduit because it's got a few small changes between Java and Bedrock. The Java version is pretty simple. You can place it on the ground and— just kidding, it's not on the ground, stupid! In Java, whenever you place it, it'll actually hover over the ground a little bit, which can make it harder to use in case you want to use it for decoration. Not that it's the prettiest block, but I'm sure some uses could be found. Luckily in Bedrock Edition, the Conduit won't float, instead it'll actually just be connected to the floor. That can make it easier to decorate with, but what makes it even better is the fact that you can actually turn the Conduit in Bedrock. In Java, it can't turn at all no matter how you place it, but Bedrock lets you orient the Conduit in 12 different directions, just like mob heads. Also, if you're curious, no, you can't turn the heavy core in either version, unfortunately. But yeah, I think this would be a nice thing to add to Java for the Conduit. I haven't ever seen it used in a build as decoration, but surely someone could figure something out with this much customization. Speaking of placing blocks, I'm running out of transitions. I want to quickly touch on one of the few facts in this video that I did know about before researching that I just for some reason forgot to include in the first video. Bridging in Minecraft is very important, and I'm sure everyone knows that you can easily create a bridge by crouching and looking backwards. However, in Bedrock Edition, there's another method you could try as well. If you get up to the edge of a block, you can actually place another block next to it without having to crouch on the edge. It is a little finicky, but if you can get it to work, that can let you bridge much faster than normal crouching. This could definitely be helpful in PvP game modes like Bed Wars to bridge faster, or just in survival scenarios where you might have to bridge while something is shooting at you. At the very least, I think getting the option to do this on Java would be nice, even if it was locked behind the settings menu. Now we do have a few more big things to cover in this video, but before we get to those, I want to quickly rapid fire through a few small ones. First up, comparators and repeaters can, for some reason, be placed on walls and fences in Bedrock Edition while they can't in Java. I'm sure someone out there will think that's cool. Using Silk Touch, you could pick up path blocks and keep them in your inventory, which is something you can't do at all in Java Edition. Not sure why you would need to hold onto a ton of path blocks like that, but it's cool that you can, I guess. And for our final pick at this rapid fire round, for some reason, you can enchant the Recovery Compass with Curse of Vanishing in Bedrock Edition. That is a really strange choice, but believe it or not, it actually gets even weirder. Curse of Vanishing is the enchantment that can be applied to the most items in the game, since it can even be put on stuff like pumpkins and heads, which Mending can't since they don't have durability. In this list of items that Curse of Vanishing can be applied to, though, you may notice that the normal compass is also here for both versions. So why would the Recovery Compass getting Curse of Vanishing only be in Bedrock? And more importantly, why can either of these get the curse? Everything else here is a tool with durability or something you can wear, so the compass being here at all is very strange. It seems like the Recovery Compass curse is just something they forgot to add for Java, which I can't blame them for because literally, why would anyone ever need this? But alright, back to a few of the bigger features, I want to talk about 3 exclusive blocks in Bedrock Edition. Now this is a bit different from the other stuff I normally cover, since these blocks don't actually apply to survival mode, but are rather creative mode exclusive. These are all very helpful for making servers in different maps, and the first 2 of these are the Allow block and the Deny block. The Allow block lets people mine or break any block that is above it vertically. This is helpful for worlds which normally disable players from mining, so you can allow them to mine in particular spots. Their range extends infinitely upwards, so you can place the Allow block at the bottom of the world and it would affect every block above it. The Deny block is basically the opposite, stopping anyone without moderator or creative mode from breaking or placing blocks above it. This is helpful for protecting particular builds and areas from griefing. Now keep in mind that these blocks aren't perfect, since people can still use redstone and TNT to affect the blocks inside, but if you make the area big enough, they should work fairly well. If you really want to prevent people from getting anywhere near a build though, you can use the border block. This is somewhat similar to a barrier block, but way more powerful as its hitbox extends infinitely both upward and downward. So you can place this again at the very bottom of the world and have a completely invisible wall that is impossible to scale. Even entities can't go through it, only those that are in creative mode can fly through the barrier. I think all 3 of these blocks could be fairly helpful for map makers if they got implemented in Java. Plus I'm sure some creative mode only builders could find some ways to use the pretty unique textures, especially the bright red wall of the border. But the last big thing I wanted to look at has to do with waterlogging, as there were surprisingly a ton of differences between the 2 versions. For those of you that don't know, waterlogging is when you take a non-full block, like this slab, and place a water bucket on the same tile. This can be fairly useful for building in a lot of scenarios, and the feature does exist on both versions. However, the blocks that waterlogging works with are different between Bedrock and Java. In fact, there were about 40 blocks that got exclusive waterlogging properties on Bedrock Edition, so I wanted to quickly run through them. Now there are some blocks that have pretty unique changes, so we'll quickly run through the more basic ones before we get to the more notable additions. These basic ones are just blocks that honestly make sense to waterlog in both versions, but are for some reason Bedrock exclusive. Those are the anvils, azaleas, banners, bell, brewing stand, buttons, cake, carpets, cobweb, composter, daylight detector, dead bush, dragon egg, enchanting table, end portal frame, fence gate, flower pot, grindstone, heads, hopper, spawners, pressure plates, stone cutter, turtle egg, and vines. Despite being the more basic blocks, I think a lot of these could be quite useful for builders, like using dead bushes to decorate the bottom of the sea, using buttons to look like underwater pebbles, and so on. Also, you can throw doors on that list too, but I wanted to make an extra note of it because people often use doors to breathe underwater in Java, so if you go to Bedrock, be very careful. But those are just the basic ones. What about the more notable waterlogging changes? Well, for starters, there were a few that look like full blocks but can still be waterlogged regardless. Those are pistons, shulker boxes, and most bizarrely of all, beacons. The first 2 can become non-full blocks by being activated or opened, but the beacon just makes no sense whatsoever. This next set of blocks can not only be waterlogged by a source, but can even be placed in flowing water as well. As far as I could tell, no blocks in Java Edition are able to occupy the same space as flowing water, which makes this set of blocks very interesting. Those are the big and small drip leaf, end rod, lever, mangrove propagule, comparator, repeater, string, and tripwire hook. A lot of these are redstone based, which I thought was pretty interesting, so this can be used to detect things passing through water streams or just prevent completely destroying redstone contraptions if you spill water on it by mistake. As for our last 3 blocks, these each have totally unique interactions with waterlogging. First up, the cauldron. To add on to its way better abilities in Bedrock like having colored water, if you place it below a water block, it'll actually fill itself. That's a pretty cute addition, though sadly it doesn't work for for lava as well. Cactuses are programmed to work with waterlogging, but due to how they're placed, you literally can't get this to happen in survival. But for our final waterloggable block, we have beds, and this actually has a really cute Easter egg attached. If you try and click on a bed while it's waterlogged, you'll notice that you won't be able to use it, which makes sense because you would drown while sleeping. But what if you couldn't drown? If you have either the water breathing or conduit power effect applied, you'll actually be able to sleep. I thought that was a really cute detail, and it's definitely the most interesting of this waterloggable bunch. I think it would be fantastic if all of this came over to Java someday, as I think some talented builders could really use them all to make something cool. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you love the Bedrock chest inventory texture for being slightly fatter than Java's and hate me for not mentioning it? Let me know in the comments. I really had a lot of fun discovering all of this stuff in this video. It's definitely a lot less useful stuff than I brought up in the first episode, but I think obscure differences like this are still extremely interesting. Oh yeah, and also before people comment, I didn't bring up the new shaders yet because they're going to be added to Java eventually. Mario. But before I go, I've got to thank my members being Maidzio2, Magnuson Larslot, Trifector, Luma, Tibby, Drybones, Fredbear's Diner, Mario Master 101, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Blessed Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Wyatt Derpy, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Kid Trunks 15, Enchanted Skull, SMA, B Major 2003, Arson the Raboot, Sir Moosty, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ingenio TM, CW McCain, JubeTube, Tesseract, Mr. McMahon 5702, Jameson Payton, Golden Sunslash 15, Z-Frost, Stuffy Ant, Justex, Concanet Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.